Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining me today for another Twilight Zone video in my Twilight Zone ranking series, where I rank every episode from the original Twilight Zone from my least favorite to my favorite. Today I'm going to be talking about number 128 on the list. The seventh is made up of Phantoms, written by Rod Serling and directed by Alan Crosland Jr. This is a season 5 Twilight Zone episode, and as always there will be spoilers. So, this premise of this episode is kind of strange, but kind of interesting. So these three National Guard soldiers are around the site of Little Bighorn, a historical battle, and they find themselves more and more as the episode goes being drawn towards this battle. Now, the setup is good. It's interesting to think that soldiers from the modern day could be drawn into a battle from the past. I kind of like that. Not sure the episode quite does enough with it, but it's a decent setup. It was kind of interesting. There was suspense as to what would happen next as the soldiers kept talking and getting clues as to what was going on. The guys, their names are William, Richard, and Michael, I believe. The characters are fine, but I mean, they're not that great, but they're not terrible either. They do know a lot, curiously, about this battle, though. Some of the conclusions they come up with are interesting, but it does seem like a bit of a stretch that they know so much about, like, exactly what's happening at one time. But it feels a little bit like a plot convenience. But if you just go with it, it's done okay. My bigger issue with this episode is that there's just too much exposition explaining things. I realize they didn't have the budgets that TV has now, but Twilight Zone usually does show us stuff. I feel like in this episode they're just telling us everything. We get little clues, but not much. Most of this episode is just talking about what's going to happen, not really seeing it. But the episode does hint at a lot of interesting things, and it just leaves you to draw your own conclusions about certain things, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. Here it's just kind of okay. The ending is also very, very weird, although somewhat thought-provoking, as there's this other character, Lieutenant Woodward, who's been hanging around throughout the episode, and he finds evidence that these three men wound up in the battle at Custer's last stand. So, as for the ending, I'll kind of let everyone draw their own conclusions and decide whether they like the ending or not. It's kind of interesting, but I feel like I would have cared more if they just would have shown us more instead of explaining everything. But the dialogue is interesting. The stuff they explain is interesting. If you're really into history, you might enjoy this episode even a bit more than I did. There's nothing really wrong with this episode. Everything was solid. It just doesn't do that much to really excite me either. But I did find I liked it a little more this time than I did last time I watched it. So maybe I'll enjoy it even more again in the future. But as it is, seventh is made up of Phantoms. It's just an average episode for me. And that's why it comes in where it does at number 128 on the list. As always, feel free to leave me a comment if you have any thoughts on 7th is made up of Phantoms, and thanks for watching.